Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. You may want to put aside your Thanksgiving leftovers for just a minute because we've got a very important Watchman Newscast breaking news update for you today, Friday, November 27th. Iran's top nuclear scientist, the man in charge of Iran's nuclear weapons program, was killed. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was killed in the town of Absard, just east of the Iranian capital of Tehran. Now, he was apparently traveling in a car down a road and was shot and killed. According to various reports, there may have also been an explosion, but he was absolutely shot. And the bottom line is, Fakhrizadeh is dead. This is the man who's been called the father of Iran's nuclear bomb. Folks, this is a major development. We're going to tell you who he was, why it's so important, and perhaps most importantly, what comes next in a minute. Before we get into it, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, it's the day after Thanksgiving here in the United States. A lot of people are kind of laying low. My editor's on vacation. God bless him. That's why we're just coming to you from our phone today. But we want to live up to our name on the Watchman News channel, and I want to be a watchman on the wall for such a time as this for you, our Watchman Newscast viewers and subscribers. So we wanted to come to you, with this breaking news update, because what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. Okay, let's get into it. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Who was he and why is his death today so important? Well, as I mentioned, he was the most important nuclear scientist in the Iranian regime, the head of their illicit nuclear weapons program. He also headed up a program called Ahmad, or Hope, several years ago. Apparently, that was one of the front names for Iran's nuclear program. He was an officer in Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards Corps, and he was a man thought very highly of by the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and the various figures in the Iranian regime. But they weren't the only ones who were well aware of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. In April 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech when he outlined some of Fakhrizadeh's activities spearheading Iran's nuclear weapons program. And he said, remember that name. And I quote, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, and this is over 2 years ago, he said, Fakhrizadeh, remember that name. Which brings us to who was behind this? Who was behind the death today of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, again, just east of the Iranian capital of Tehran, taken out in his car as he was driving along there? Obviously, first thoughts, most people are looking to Israel for a few reasons. Number one, Iran is committed to wiping the state of Israel off the map. And if Iran acquires the bomb, acquires the world's deadliest weapon, a nuclear weapon, they could accomplish that mission. So Israel obviously has great motivation to prevent that and to take out the father of the Iranian nuclear bomb. But number two, this kind of fits a pattern, folks, from over the past several years, where Israel has taken out Iranian scientists in the past on Iranian soil. And in a similar fashion, in the streets of Tehran a few years back, we had a motorcycle kind of drive up and take out one of these Iranian scientists. So this kind of has the hallmarks of an Israeli operation, or perhaps some Iranian allies of Israel inside Iran. The Iranian regime has many enemies, including many of their own people inside that country. So who knows exactly who carried it out? We may never know. There was one report out of Iran's official news agency, the Fars news agency, saying that a few of the attackers were killed. A few of the people behind the death of Fakhrizadeh were killed. Who knows? It's not easy to take reports from Iran's state media at face value, obviously. But what we do have, obviously, is a pattern here where Israel has carried out similar attacks over the past several years, similar to the style that we saw today with the killing of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the father of Iran's nuclear bomb. Not only that, right here on the Watchman Newscast just last week, you can check it out in our archives here on YouTube, we talked about the August killing again on Iranian soil, this time in the Iranian capital of Tehran, of Al-Qaeda's their number two ranking leader, Mohammed al-Masri. He was living freely in Iran. Very interesting. And Israel reportedly took him out on the streets of Iran. Similar. Mohammed al-Masri driving in a car with his daughter, who was married to Osama bin Laden's son. How nice. And they were driving along and they were shot and killed and taken out on a road in Iran. So this kind of fits a pattern. Israel obviously wants to prevent Iran from acquiring the bomb, as does the United States right now under President Trump. Not only that, there is a pattern here of similar kinds of takeouts, I guess you would say, on Iranian soil, most likely carried out by Israel. Here's another thing to keep in mind. We had the killing of Al-Qaeda leader Mohammed al-Masri back in August, but details of that are just emerging. And apparently that killing came with the full support of the United States. I'm sure the takeout of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh today, Friday, November 27th, again, breaking news, the day after Thanksgiving. I'm sure this came with the full approval of the United States, of the Trump administration. President Trump actually retweeted some news about this today. But think about, folks, the past several months. Hey, not only al-Masri's takeout, the attack today, we've been reporting throughout the past several weeks, Israel taking out Iranian targets in Syria and preemptively striking at Iran and Hezbollah's military assets in Syria, right along Israel's northeastern border. That's another strain to this story. And then look back at the summertime. And this is something we were reporting on almost a daily basis here on the Watchman Newscast back in June, July, and August, when reportedly Israel, again, no one's claiming responsibility for these attacks, but reportedly Israel was carrying out acts of sabotage against Iran's nuclear facilities and against its ballistic missile factories. That was over the summer. I say all that to say, if you add all this together, the Iranian regime has, a lot of egg on its face. This is a serious embarrassment for the Iranian regime. Let's take it back to the very first few days of 2020, the very beginning of the year, early January 2020, when Qasem Soleimani, the terror master, was taken out by the United States. Now we have the leader of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Hey, folks, he may not have been Qasem Soleimani in terms of his fame, his international fame, or should I say infamy and stature, but obviously a pillar of the Iranian regime, a very important figure. Hey, they're all in on that nuclear program, right? And he was heading up that very program. Now he is gone. And the way it happened, in dramatic fashion, taken out on the street, this is another black eye for the Iranian regime. If I'm a member of that regime, I'm saying, hey, we can't protect our best people. We can't protect our leading lights, whether it's Qasem Soleimani, who is arguably the second or third most powerful man in all of Iran, and now Iran's top nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. So you have them clearly feeling uneasy about that. You have obviously the string of attacks on Iranian soil that I just laid out for you over the past year. You have very strong U.S. sanctions that are squeezing the Iranian regime economically. And even look back, rewind to 2018 when the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, swooped into Tehran. I don't know how they did it, but they were able to extract highly sensitive documents pertaining to Iran's nuclear weapons program, bring them back to Israel. And Prime Minister Netanyahu held that famous press conference where he revealed all of that information. And if I'm not mistaken, that may have been the very press conference where he mentioned, yes, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, and said, remember that name. So where are we now? The next question obviously is, okay, will the Iranian regime retaliate? Again, a major blow. They are painting Fakhrizadeh already in the media as a leading martyr, a leading light of the Iranian revolution. Let's see what Iranian officials are saying here. The Times of Israel has a very good roundup. The Iranian foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, who you've seen meeting with John Kerry in the past and various European officials, he says there were serious indications of an Israeli role in the assassination. Terrorists, ironically enough, coming from the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism, the Iranian regime, but I digress. Zarif said terrorists murdered an eminent Iranian scientist today. This cowardice, with serious indications of an Israeli role, shows desperate warmongering of the perpetrators, wrote Zarif on Twitter. He called on the international community to end double standards and condemn this. We had a top advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, issued a warning on Twitter. He said, this is interesting too, because he's referring to President Trump here apparently, in the last days of their gambling allies' political life, President Trump, I assume, the Zionists seek to intensify and increase pressure on Iran to wage a full-blown war. We will descend like lightning on the killers of this oppressed martyr, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, and we will make them regret their actions. And then Iran's military chief, Mohammad Bagheri, accused, quote, the malicious Zionist entity of committing a brutal act. And it goes on. They are breathing threats against Israel and promising retaliation. These are top Iranian officials. They did the same thing in the wake of Soleimani's death. Again, Fakhrizadeh, not of the stature of Soleimani, but folks, let's not underestimate the importance of this today. So important that the mainstream media is actually covering it. Imagine that, although they're framing it in a slightly different way than we are here on the Watchman Newscast. But this is the role we're trying to play for you. This is the kind of cutting-edge, timely information and analysis you're not hearing in the mainstream media. That's why we do what we do. So retaliation, possible retaliation, God forbid. What does it look like? Number one, the most likely avenue of retaliation for the Iranian regime would be, like they've done historically, act out and lash out against Israel through proxy. I'm talking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and in Syria, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Could we see some kind of attempted terror attack? We've reported here in the Watchman Newscast about these. It got darker in here all of a sudden. I don't know why. It does look like it may rain here in Pennsylvania, where I'm coming to you from. But we've seen a succession of attempted attacks, cross-border attacks with the Iranian regime, attempting to plant explosives on the Syria-Israel border, with attempted incursions out of Lebanon into northern Israel, shots fired by Hezbollah operatives. So that could be one avenue of retaliation. Folks, I think we're to the point where Israel and the United States are hitting Iran so hard, both physically with taking out and sabotaging sensitive nuclear and missile sites, taking out top scientists, top terror masters like Soleimani, squeezing the regime economically. I think Iran's going to have a response eventually. God forbid, we do not want to see that, obviously, but I think the pressure is on the Iranian regime, where the more radical elements, and they're all radical in Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, but the real power brokers in the IRGC, who are basically the Gestapo of the Iranian regime, they are going to begin demanding serious retaliation, I believe, as these attacks continue. So number one, Iran could lash out from Syria or from Lebanon through proxy against Israel, or from Gaza against Israel through proxy. That's number one. Number two, we've seen this in the past as well. We saw it in Bulgaria, Thailand, Cyprus, various places around the world. The Iranian regime, Hezbollah, and their agents could attempt to strike Israeli and Jewish targets outside of Israel, embassies, consulates, Israeli officials, Jewish leaders around the world. We saw Iran do this in Argentina, notoriously so, and kill hundreds of people back in 1992-94, I believe, 92-94, the Argentina bombings there in Buenos Aires, Israeli targets and the Israeli embassy and a Jewish community center there targeted by the Iranian regime. So that's the two leading possibilities, I believe. We could even see Iran try to launch rockets out of Syria. They've done that in the past. May 2018, I was there, folks. The day after, I was on the Golan Heights across the border from Syria, as the Iranian regime the night before had fired, I believe, some 32 rockets at northern Israel. Thankfully, none of them hit their target, and Israel responded with overwhelming force. So I would say to the Iranian regime, if you're thinking of some kind of retaliation right now, rest assured, based on what we've seen the past few years, Israel will respond with tremendous force. If you don't believe me, just check out some of our newscasts from this week, including Wednesday, November 25th. Israel just this week took out 8 Iran-backed fighters in Syria via airstrikes. Another possible avenue of retaliation is, could the Iranian regime try to pull the United States in this? Obviously, we have a presence, troops in Iraq right now, in the Persian Gulf region. Could Iran, again, God forbid, attempt some kind of attack against U.S. assets as well? Hey, we don't want to see this, folks. We don't want to see this escalate. But the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So we're bringing you the truth. I think you'd rather know than not know the possibilities here. We will not mince words. These are potential ramifications of what went down today with the killing of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. But I believe Israel says that's a risk worth taking, because this was a man who was behind a program that is dedicating to destroying our nation and pushing everyone in Israel into the sea. So I think Israel will take those odds, and I'm sure they weighed the potential response, just as the United States did when they took out Qasem Soleimani, who, by the way, had attacks in the works against U.S. interests. And Israel weighed the cost and said, we need to do this for the security of our nation, which is the size of the state of New Jersey. Imagine that. That's how tiny Israel is. One last thing we have to mention here. I should have mentioned at the top. I kind of buried the lead, I guess. Iran is enriching uranium at very high and dangerous levels. And we talked about that also recently on the newscast. We're trying to come to you every time. We come every Tuesday and Thursday, folks, here on YouTube with a newscast. But when things are breaking, we'll come to you from anywhere, at any time, on the phone, in my living room, wherever, with this news. But Iran is enriching 12 times the amount of uranium that is permitted under that Iran nuclear deal, which the United States, thankfully under President Trump, pulled out of in 2018. So their enriching of uranium is off the charts. That's number one. Breaking the deal brazenly in the face of Britain, France, Germany, China, and Russia, which are still signed on to that Iran nuclear deal. Brazenly enriching massive amounts of uranium, and now taking their Natanz nuclear facility, that's their number one nuclear facility in Natanz, taking that underground. So it's pretty much a fortified underground bunker where the centrifuges are spinning. So all of this is happening to the point that reportedly President Trump, about 2 weeks ago, when news of this Natanz activity emerged and these crazy uranium levels being enriched, President Trump apparently said to his team, what are our options? Should we possibly take out this Natanz reactor? So we don't know. He reportedly said that. We don't know what was discussed in this meeting, but these are the reports. That's what we can say. And as the leader of the free world, in President Trump, a man who's been very strong against Iran and their nuclear program, I think any rational leader, whether Republican or Democrat, always has said, when it comes to Iran's nuclear program, all options are on the table. Barack Obama even said all options are on the table. He consistently said that. President Trump has said the same thing. So there was kind of a stir in the mainstream media when President Trump reportedly said, okay, guys, what's our options here? Democrat presidents have done the same thing. So it was only a stir because it was President Trump, quite frankly. But hey, to me, you're being the leader of the free world and being responsible and protecting your country, because a nuclear Iran not only threatens Israel, it threatens the world. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason that the Iranian regime is developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. They do exactly what their name says. They travel across oceans, they travel across continents, and those ICBMs are not for Israel, they're not for Saudi Arabia, they're not even for Europe. They're for the great Satan. That's what Iran calls us here in the United States, the great Satan, the United States of America. So you develop those ICBMs for one reason and one reason only, to mount them with a nuclear warhead. So it's no surprise that the President of the United States would say, hey, what are we going to do about this? Especially if in 2 months, if Joe Biden comes into office, things are still shaking out here in the United States with the election, investigations. We'll see what happens. But what we do know is that Joe Biden has pledged to re-enter that Iran nuclear deal, which is a disaster. President Trump obviously pulled the United States out of it, has done such important work, in my view, to put pressure on Iran. And I can't believe that he would like to see 4 years of hard work in pushing this wicked regime in Tehran against the wall all go down the drain under a new administration. So continue to keep an eye on this. Fasten your seatbelt, folks, for the rest of 2020. It's been quite a year already. As we all know, there's still 1 month left. We want to be your source for breaking analysis when things happen in the world's most volatile and strategic, and I would say important region, the Middle East. And when things happen regarding the apple of God's eye, the nation of Israel. We look forward to being back on the ground in Israel. I'm usually in the land of Israel 5, even 6 times per year, and in Iraq and Jordan, other places around the Middle East, bringing you the kind of on-the-ground perspective that you're just not getting anywhere else. That's on the Watchman TV show, which you can catch on TBN and Amazon Prime. And of course, hey, click the notification bell and subscribe because, like I said, Tuesday and Thursday, we're coming to you every Tuesday and Thursday faithfully. We are posting new videos here from our Watchman studio, usually not from my living room. But hey, you're here for the content, not for the bells and whistles. But every Tuesday and Thursday, you can count on new updates. But this week, we've given you 4. We came to you also on Wednesday with a special breaking news update. Now on Friday with a breaking news update. And stay tuned. When you click the notification bell after you subscribe, you'll get alerts so you know when we are posting these videos, not just Tuesday and Thursday. And we've got some really good things in the works. Hey, happy Thanksgiving to everyone here in the United States and around the world. Even if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, we are thankful for you, our Watchmen subscribers and viewers. God bless you. Let's keep an eye on what's happening right now. If retaliation comes from Iran, it may not come right away, but if, God forbid, it does come, if anything else happens in the region, we will come to you from our studio, from our phone, wherever we are. We'll come to you with a breaking news update. Until then, enjoy your weekend. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.